You're listening to the Kitchen Confession Podcast with Chef Mary Mammoliti.
Contrary to the old Seinfeld episode, soup can be a meal. Okay? Depends what you put into it, but yes, it can be a meal. I like a good hearty soup, but I also like a soup, like a tomato soup with a grilled cheese sandwich. I mean, they go together, right? You just smell it, it's simmering away for a couple of hours, and the whole house smells of it, and it's one of the ultimate comfort foods, I think, out there. I don't see you going wrong with a bowl of soup. And that's the other thing I like. I like to sort of experiment with things and try new things, right? So Super Sundays let me do that.
I'm Mary Mammoliti, and you're listening to the Kitchen Confession Podcast. Today, I'm talking with radio personality Mike Ross, public address announcer of the Toronto Maple Leafs and fellow foodie friend. Thank you, Mike, so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
And I want to start by getting into how did you get started in broadcasting?
I went to Carleton University in Ottawa and originally was going to school to be a teacher. And I'd always kind of been interested in broadcasting or fascinated with it, but never really thought of it as a potential career. I think probably the most I thought about it was watching old, episodes of WKRP when I was a kid and thinking, man, radio's cool.
I remember that.
Right. And so when I got to university, I discovered that they had one of the original campus community radio stations in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some pretty big names in the world of broadcasting in both news and sports who had been through there. So I thought, you know what? Maybe here's an opportunity for me to give it a try, see if I like it, and just have some fun with it. And so I walked in and said, I'd like to help out. And they said, well, what do you do? What do you like? And I said, I like sports. And they said, well, we have a sports show on Monday. Show up. The first year that I was in broadcasting, I was on a top 40 station. And after a year, they flipped the format to all sports. And they kept me on as I began as a producer. And then it just sort of went from there, where I just started doing more on-air stuff, more reporting, and just sort of evolved over the years into where I'm at now, which is basically hosting full-time.
Speaking of hosting, live from Studio 5.
Yeah.
That's my very first introduction to radio was when I was speaking to you and Joada. So tell us a little bit about Live from Studio 5.
So Live from Studio 5 is a daily variety show, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
sort of current affairs show. And it's on AMI, which is all about broadcasting programming through the lens of disability, and specifically the blind and partially sighted community in Canada. And so AMI in its previous life was a reading service. So people would tune into a channel on the television and would hear professional readers reading newspaper articles and magazine articles. And then with AMI still has a lot of elements of the reading service built into it, because that's their, the whole genesis of it.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually they got into long form programming. I call it sort of CBC or NPR style programming, where they would take really deep dives and put on sort of 1 hour documentary style shows. And in 2015, they decided that they wanted to do something a little bit different and get into live broadcasting. They were jumping into live programming for the first time, and it was going to be a startup. It was going to be part of building something, because most of the places I've worked in broadcasting, I've always been in at the ground floor building it up, which mm-hmm. is pretty unique.
And exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the challenge and just the thrill of building something. It just can't be beat, especially when you sit back and you see these things years later still thriving, mm-hmm. And knowing that I was part of the startup of it is remarkable.
You're also the PA announcer for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yes, I am the public address announcer for the Maple Leafs. I have been since the 2016-2017 season. So this is my third season with the team. And the cool thing about that is I'm only the fourth person in history to hold down that gig. So it's been a pretty exclusive club, and the people that have done it usually end up doing it for a pretty long time. So I'm just sort of a little baby compared to the guys who've done it before me.
What's that like?
The Leafs gig it's just a dream come true. It's my childhood team, the team that I cheered for. The first hockey jersey I got was a Maple Leafs jersey, and to be their arena voice is like never once would have imagined this would happen.
And I have to ask this: do you ever get nervous? Because I know I do.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't get nervous with the radio show / TV show. I think I was probably nervous on our launch day when we were starting, but I've been doing talk radio now for 14 years in Toronto, and in fact, I'm 21 years really of talk radio total. So it's just something that I've done for a long time.
Well, do you have any tips for any aspiring broadcasters?
Wow. My number one tip for anyone getting into the business is, I'll give you two. Number one, don't do it to get rich, because most people who get into broadcasting are not going to get rich. You may be able to cut out a good life for yourself and do well, but don't get into it thinking you're going to be, Howard Stern making $100 million a year, because you're not.
Right.
Keep in mind that you live in Canada, so the media market's a lot smaller. But the great thing about that is the media the market or the industry is smaller. So you're going to meet a lot of people many, many times over in your career. So make those relationships count. Number two is try not to say no to opportunities. And I know that's a hard one for some people to swallow, to say that, sometimes, you take that extra shift and you're not going to get paid for it, or take that extra opportunity to go and cover an event even though you're not going to get paid for it.
Right.
And there are a lot of people who won't do that, who don't want, they want to get paid for everything they do, and I can totally get it. But I also know that from my experience, one of the things that it sort of steps off the page for people, for employers and bosses and colleagues, is when you go that extra mile. And that's broadcasting. I mean, you don't get overtime. You don't you end up working a lot of, if you're getting into sports, you're going to work nights, you're going to work weekends. That's just the way it goes. But if you're a go-getter from the beginning and you're willing to put in the extra time, I would say that 9 times out of 10, it's going to come back and reward you in the end.
So I've got about 5 questions for you. It's like a rapid fire. First one, you've got 5 minutes to move into a new kitchen, and you can only take one item with you. What would it be and why?
It would be my knife set, because no matter what, I can stir a soup with a lot of different things, but I can only chop up the ingredients with my knives because they're awesome.
Smart. Okay, describe your culinary style in 2 words.
Recipe based.
Justin Timberlake brought sexy back. What would you bring back?
My waistline when I was 20. Absolutely, 100%. I would bring back my waistline from my 20s.
Curse words, do you use them in the kitchen?
I use them everywhere except on the radio and on the microphone at Scotiabank Arena.
And what's the curse words that you choose in the kitchen?
The F word is always good, but see, I'm also French, so I can throw out some beauties.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Favorite snack?
I gotta go with popcorn. I love popcorn,
That little crunch.
especially the theater popcorn. Right? Like I've actually driven to our local Cineplex, bought popcorn, and brought it back to my house for movie night.
Really? I mean, I'm drinking a gallon of water after that.
Oh,
Every
no,
time I eat
it's
that popcorn.
the toastiness of it. There's a roasted taste to it that I guess you get from the oil that you just don't get from the microwavable stuff.
I want to kind of circle back to Live from Studio 5 for a second because you guys did something really interesting recently. You basically went on a trip across Canada, but I like to say you could basically ate your way across Canada during this recent road trip. How did you guys, like every place you stop, you would stop at one location and you would go and eat at a specific restaurant?
Yeah, so what we did was, first and foremost, we decided to do a little research and see what kind of foods were was each province sort of known for. And I mean, some of them were fairly obvious, right? I mean, you think the Maritimes, you go to the Atlantic provinces, and having been to some of them before, I knew, that I'm going to PEI, I'm going to be eating some mussels. I'm going to New Brunswick, I'm having the oysters, lobster in Nova Scotia, and cod in Newfoundland. Those were almost, no-brainers. So we knew going into the trip, and we covered off every Canadian province. So over the span of about 5 weeks, we visited 10 provinces, 13 cities. And in every province, we were able to knock off the food item that we were going for, except for Saskatchewan. We were only in Saskatchewan for about, I'd say less than 24 hours, and we were supposed to be looking for Saskatoon berry pie, and we never found it.
Saskatoon berry pie, what's that?
Yeah, I don't know. I all I found was a write-up on it. I don't even know what it looks like. And we went to 2 different restaurants while we were in Regina, and we didn't find it. But everywhere else, be it steak in Alberta, sushi in BC, we had it all.
Did you guys get to eat anything unusual?
In Winnipeg, we went to an Indigenous restaurant. And what was cool about that was all Indigenous inspired items on the menu. So we had bison.
See, that's one cuisine I'd love to try.
It was delicious. It was so good. But what I really loved about this restaurant was not only was it all Indigenous food, but they also hire Indigenous youth to work for them. They seek out, young people who need work, who really are at that point in life where you're trying to find yourself, you're trying to find where you're going. And if the culinary arts is something that they're interested in, then they bring them in. And everything about that restaurant, that whole experience was phenomenal.
I'm Mary Mammoliti, and you're listening to the Kitchen Confession Podcast. Today I'm talking with radio personality Mike Ross. When did you really start cooking? When did you really start getting into it?
I think the earliest memory I have of actual cooking, I would have been probably about 15 years old, and I'm pretty sure it was to impress a girl.
How every guy's story starts.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And I used to watch, I've always watched cooking shows. I think I just find them hypnotizing, I think. And I watched the Wok with Yan cooking show that used to be on.
Wasn't he fantastic?
Yeah, loved him. The comedy,
he was awesome.
The entertainment value was great just on its own.
Him and Chef Pasquale.
Yes, and we had one of the Wok with Yan cookbooks, and so I made what was called seafood in a nest. I mean, I'd never thought of making anything like that, but I went out, bought the ingredients, and everything turned out magnificently. And so that's the earliest memory I have of cooking something like that. But then I knew I could do it. I got married, my wife did most of the cooking,
Mm-hmm.
and that was mainly because I worked afternoons, so I didn't get home till 7 o'clock. And in 2002, I had a job change, and suddenly I was working 4 days, and I was off for 4 days. My 4 off days became like me cooking nights.
I find it so relaxing and so soothing for me,
Oh, it
right?
is absolutely therapeutic, whether I've got the TV on or I've got music on.
Oh, you do the music too? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah,
Yeah, so do I.
yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of opera and classical music,
Oh,
so I'll put some of that on and just like, yeah, it's therapeutic.
do you share your kitchen with your wife? Do you cook together, or is it one of those things where I'm in here, I'm cooking, I'm doing my thing?
Yeah, it's my kitchen. It's my kitchen. Don't come into my kitchen when I'm cooking unless I ask you into it. Some of it has to do with just that it's not a huge kitchen to begin with, but it's also just that a lot of the time I'm a recipe cook. But even with that, I have pre-read the recipe. I've got an idea of what I have to do and the timing that I need. And if somebody's stepping in, um, I find it can be a little difficult to manage, and it interferes with my timing.
Mm-hmm.
But I have found myself more in the last year or so, um, bringing her or my niece into it. My niece, especially, because I'm showing her how to cook, and teaching her, some techniques, and she's really anxious to learn about it. So there's been a little bit more traffic in the kitchen over the last year, but generally speaking, when I'm in there, I don't really want to. I don't want to mess around. I don't want to be interfered with. So it sounds pretty strict, but in the end, when they take that first forkful and they love it,
Mm-hmm.
then all is forgiven.
See, and all is forgotten.
That's right.
Oh, and I have to mention this. What is Super Sundays?
Okay, Super Sundays. I'm a big football fan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Buffalo Bills fan.
Isn't it Go Bills? Is that it? Am I
Right?
right?
Go Bills. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go Buffalo. Tough season this year, but anyway, since those 4 Super Bowl losses in a row, it's been tough to be a Buffalo Bills fan anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found was I love soup, and I love stews, and I love chilies, and well, I'm watching a lot of the Bills games are at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then by 4 o'clock they're done. And though I'm still watching other games, I kind of found myself sitting there, saying, what are we making for supper tonight? And it just, I can't even think of the first time that I did it, but I thought, let's make some soup. Like, let's make this a meal. So get a nice baguette or a nice loaf of bread, and come up with a new recipe of soup every Sunday through the football season, or as many Sundays as I can during the football season. It just sort of evolved, and then with the arrival of social media, it's like, well, Super Sunday sounds right.
Yeah.
So that works, and so yeah, I mean, it started off as being really simple soups.
Now, why soup?
Because contrary to the old Seinfeld episode, soup can be a meal. Okay? Depends what you put into it, but yes, it can be a meal.
I know the episode you're talking about.
Right? Right? And so I like a good hearty soup, but I also like a soup with like a tomato soup with a grilled cheese sandwich. I mean, they go together, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was I like the fact that you sort of build up the soup, like there's layers to it, and it just works out time wise where I can start a soup at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or earlier if the Bills like this year are getting pounded at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
I can start putting it all together, and you just smell it. It's simmering away for a couple of hours, and the whole house smells of it. And I don't know, it's one of the ultimate comfort foods, I think, out there.
Oh, I agree.
I don't see you going wrong with a bowl of soup.
Yeah, like that first spoon of it when you take it and it just warms your inside, like everything heats up.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
love that.
exactly.
It's like
Yeah.
a hug, a warm hug.
It is. It absolutely is. Yeah. So yeah, that was the genesis of Super Sundays, and now it's we sort of passed it on because my niece is going to school here in Toronto, and she's been living with us now for a couple of years, and she loves Super Sundays. So she now tries to call which soup gets made,
Oh,
and
that's
and every
hilarious.
once in a while, yeah, every once in a while, I let her pick the soup and make it. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I surprised her. I made a mulligatawny, which I've never. I can't remember the last time I cooked with curry,
Mm-hmm.
and I've never cooked with coconut milk before. So I put this soup together. She had no idea. She was out of town. She came home later on that Sunday and had a bowl of the soup left over for her. And she said, "Wow, you really surprised me by going sort of off the page with that." And that's the other thing I like. I like to sort of experiment with things and try new things, right? So Super Sundays let me do that.
I ask all my guests the same question. What is your kitchen confession? Do you have a kitchen confession to share with me?
You know what? I do actually, and there are only a handful of people who have heard this story. When I was a kid, I grew up next door, literally next door to my grandparents' house,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't have a lot of kids in my neighborhood. In fact, on my street, there were no other kids. It was just me. So I spent a lot of time with my grandparents growing up, especially my grandfather, where that's where I got my love of sports and my love of politics. And my grandmother absolutely was part of giving me my love of food because she was a great cook. And I was one of 6 grandchildren who were regularly around their house. So there were always a lot of cookies, a lot of ice cream, and a lot of pop at their house. At the time, it all seemed great. Now, as a type 2 diabetic, maybe I would have reviewed some of the things that we were consuming back then. But that being said, she would buy ice cream in these big bulk containers, right? Like the no name, uh, 4-liter tubs.
We can dive in.
That's yes. But back then, her freezer was pretty full, and there was no room for one big 4-liter tub. So what she would do is take these empty containers of Cool Whip whipped cream and put the ice cream in that, and then put those in the freezer, and then store them in that. Right? It was much easier
Right.
to make to take one of those out and serve everybody than the big giant tub.
Mm-hmm.
So one day I'm at their house and I'm going downstairs to watch TV. So I grab my ball of pop and I go and grab a Cool Whip container.
Italian
and a
Tupperware
spoon,
is what we used to
right?
call it.
Exactly, right? And grab a spoon, and I'm going to go watch TV. And I took a spoonful of the ice cream, and it tasted off. And I thought to myself, well, that's kind of weird. Like the texture of it's a little weird. And I wondered, maybe it's just like a little freezer burnt, but whatever, no big deal. It's ice cream, it's all good. And I mean, at the time, I must have been like 11 or 12 years old. So what do I know about food, right? I polish off that container, and
no.
within a couple of hours, I'm like keeled over in so much pain. I've got the worst stomach ache I've ever had in my life. So my grandmother's like, "What's the matter?" So I explained to her, well, here's the problem. It wasn't ice cream. It was an actual tub of Cool Whip.
No, it wasn't.
I ate a whole container of Cool Whip. And that's why I wasn't feeling very well. I ate a whole tub of Cool Whip. Yeah, thinking it was ice cream. So to this day, when I sit down with my family at Christmas
Uh-huh.
or any sort of occasion like that, someone, whether it be my parents, my sister, my aunt, my cousins, somebody asks if I want any Cool Whip. So, yeah. So that's my kitchen confession. I ate an entire tub of Cool Whip, thinking it was just freezer burnt vanilla ice cream.
Okay, I'm going to move on to a game called This or That.
The choice is yours. You can get with this or you can get with that.
Choose one of the two.
This or you can get with
Morning or evening?
Morning,
Pancakes or waffles?
pancakes.
Pizza or pasta?
Oh, you're killing me.
Right? I know. Hard one.
Okay, I'm going to go pasta.
Comedy or horror?
Comedy.
Burger or hot dog?
Burger.
Dine in or delivery?
Dine in.
Watching sports or eating your favorite meal?
Oh man, I can't do both. Oh, I'm gonna watch sports.
This one's really important. Toilet paper, over or under?
Oh, toilet paper is over. If you do it any other way, you're
It's just wrong. See? Okay.
You're, so wrong.
Okay, laundry or dishes?
Yep.
What's worse?
Okay, well, can I get a clarification? Am I washing or drying?
There's a difference?
Because that makes it. If I'm drying, I got no problems. I have this.
Oh,
okay,
I'm the opposite. I
Here's
hate
another-
drying.
I'm going to interrupt this game and bring back one more kitchen confession that I don't know if I've ever told anyone other than maybe two of our friends.
Oh, I'm listening.
When we first got married and we didn't have a dishwasher, so we washed the dishes every night, I actually wore dishwashing gloves because I hated getting wrinkly fingers and I hated touching like yucky food in water and like it's gross. So I wore the gloves. So that's why it's important to distinguish whether I'm washing or drying. If I'm drying, I'll
I'm
do the
learning
dishes.
so much about you.
If I'm washing, then I'm going to take the laundry. I am dainty that way. 100% happy to
Oh
admit
my
it.
God, I got to get a hold of myself here. Thank you so much
My pleasure.
for coming on the show, talking, sharing with me. It was a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you.
It's that time. We've reached the end of another show. Be sure to visit kitchenconfession.com for more recipes and foodie finds. I'd like to thank producer and editor Matt Agnew, and I'm Mary Mamaliti. See you at the next episode.